Welcome back to the Curbsiders. I'm Dr. Matthew Frank Watto, here with my great friend and America's primary care physician, Dr. Paul Nelson Williams. Paul, we're going to be talking about CGMs, continuous glucose monitors. Have you ever heard of those before?
Yeah, once or twice, I feel like patients might ask about them, so this may come up in your practice.
Yeah, I was super excited about this episode. Our great friend, Dr. Jeff Colburn, walked us through this. He actually approached us to do this episode because in April 2023, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, CMS, made this ruling that anybody with diabetes who is on a single dose of insulin per day or who's having recurrent severe hypoglycemia should qualify for a continuous glucose monitor. So it's really unlocked this for a lot of people because prior to that time, people had to be on like basal bolus, 3 or 4 times a day dosing of insulin in order to qualify. But now this is available to a lot more patients.
Yeah, it's such a gift because I remember it took an act of Congress to get one of these things for someone when they first came out, and now it's becoming almost a standard of care for anyone who's on injectable medication. So it really has opened things up in terms of how we're able to take care of patients and sort of give them a little bit more tailored guidance that is more objective.
Yeah. So Paul, what kind of information are patients going to be getting from the CGM, or when as the clinician receiving the patient in the office when they bring in their CGM, their cell phone app that has the data on there? Like, what sort of metrics are we going to be tracking?
Yeah, the overall approach or the thing that you're looking at is, and it's neat because it will tell you, like, patients love report cards, it turns out, and this will tell you specifically your time in range is how they describe it. So when your blood glucose is between 70 and 180 milligrams per deciliter, and your goal is to get to be in that range over 70% of the time, which makes good sense. The thing that we dread the most is hypoglycemia, which you really want to be in less than 5% of the time, and that's defined by most of these devices as a blood glucose of less than 70 milligrams per deciliter. And then there's a time above range. So when is the patient hyperglycemic or greater than 180 milligrams per deciliter? And you should be there less than 30% of the time. But basically that time in range, at least in my experience, Matt, is the one that the patients really fixate and kind of
Yeah,
hone in on and feel like they can celebrate when that number is in the green and sort of higher than 70%.
that's right.
It's
Because
the,
it's color coded. It's like a
yeah,
stoplight on the app. Red for lows, green for the when it's in range, and yellow for the highs. So
yeah.
patients can follow that.
But the neat thing is the variances, which can then help tailor your management. So if someone is having hypoglycemia more often than is not, you can sort of actually match the patterns to what kind of insulin you're giving them.
That's right. And they have like sort of I guess I think he called it a graphic overlay, but it's essentially, if you look up the pictures of this, it's essentially throughout the day, the time, and then the glucose level. And you can see a thin line that's like their average glucose throughout the day at certain times of day. But then it also shows you like the swings. So you can often see like this big hump, like after a certain meal, they go very high, or after a certain time of day, they tend to go low. And then you can use that to match your pattern. So to talk about some of the common patterns that we see, the first thing you want to do when you're looking for patterns is always look for hypoglycemia, because that's what can kill the patient. So even if you're seeing highs and lows, you got to address the hypoglycemia first. Then once you've targeted the hypoglycemia and you're going after the hyperglycemia, try to fix the fasting blood sugars first. Those are generally easiest to fix. I think a lot of us in primary care are used to using either metformin or basal insulin, which are good for targeting the fasting glucose. And then the final thing you would target is the postprandial glucose. So the what is the glucose doing after meal? It sounds simple, but I don't know that anyone ever said it to me this clearly about how we should be approaching this. How about you?
Yeah, right. It feels like it should be intuitive, but until I heard it out loud, I was like, oh, this, yeah. So this was, I knew the general principles, but actually hearing Jeff explain these things, it really brought remarkable clarity to it.
Remember, Dr. Colburn was talking about the hypoglycemia, and one of his patients said, "Can't I just let my body fix the hypoglycemia?" And and he was like, "No, that's bad, because the counter-regulatory hormones are very bad. They stress the heart a lot. It's epinephrine, norepinephrine, cortisol. Like, these are not good things. You don't want to be putting your body through that all the time." But Paul, you made the point about like, what kind of foods do patients tend to keep around when they have hypoglycemia? Like, what are they eating? They're generally not the best things.
It's almost invariably just the worst garbage in the world. Yeah, like I think I've had patients with like drawerfuls of cookies just to counter, which is, again, not mocking the patients, because I will say hypoglycemia is awful and feels
Yeah.
bad and is also dangerous. So I don't begrudge them that. But probably a better way is, I think we talked about something like banana with peanut butter, so you get your protein and also some carbohydrates to kind of gently control things, as opposed to just blasting yourself with Jolly Ranchers.
The banana and peanut butter is a great one they can use before they exercise,
Right.
because it has some like kind of some carbs, some fat, some protein. It'll sort of it's not going to just like, spike their sugar super, super high. But Dr. Colburn actually made the point that if someone's having nocturnal hypoglycemia and you lower their insulin or you stop the sulfonylurea, then for two reasons, they may actually have an improvement in their A1C, even though you're reducing medication. He said, number one, when you have hypoglycemia, your counter-regulatory hormones are just really spiked up for the next 24 hours, and your insulin sensitivity goes down, which makes sense because you almost died. So you don't want your body to be like super responsive to insulin. And then the other reason is for what you just said, the patient's eating garbage foods generally to save their own life, which is the right thing to do in the moment. But for those reasons, preventing hypoglycemia can actually improve the A1C without adding medication. That's why that's the first step, also because hypoglycemia is life-threatening. So we go into a ton of this with Dr. Colburn, a lot of nitty-gritty details that are super useful for you in your practice. So please check that out. You can click on the link in the transcript below. And with all that, until next time, I've been Dr. Matthew Frank Watto, and this has been another episode of the Curbsiders, bringing you a little knowledge food for your brain hole.
Yummy. And I remain Dr. Paul Nelson Williams. Thank you and goodbye.